Open the bag. Not until you pull the security footage.
Miss Sterling, please cooperate before this becomes worse.
Then check the cameras. Every movement is recorded. How convenient. She wants more time to hide the necklace. Put that bag on the desk.
Ma'am, take your hands off it.
I have nothing to hide. Then stop performing innocence.
There's something here.
That is not mine. Open it. The box was in her bag. She moved the necklace before the search. That box was planted.
Monique, stop making this worse.
Handcuff her.
Sir, there's something wrong with the Gate 2 scanner log. What are you talking about? Her bag weighed exactly the same going in and coming out.
Then someone put that box there.
Silence covered the grand lobby of the Apex Luxury Gem Distribution Center like a thick net, tightening around the little air left in the room. The heels of Victoria Sterling Vane clicked against the polished marble floor, each step carrying open contempt. The old money woman from Buckhead stood with her arms crossed, a fur coat hanging loosely over her shoulders, her eyes drilling into Monique Sterling's worn gray warehouse manager uniform, as if she were looking at a stain on a clean floor. The elegant waiting hall where an inventory check had just been held for the Buckhead Country Club charity gala suddenly turned into a public trial with no jury. 30 VIP guests who only minutes earlier had been sipping champagne beside glass display cases now chose to step back and form a circle of isolation, leaving the single mother standing alone between two local police officers. The center's direct manager, a middle-aged white man who always tried to please Atlanta's most powerful families, hurried forward with sweat covering his face. He adjusted his silk tie, his voice trembling but full of warning, deliberately pushing Monique to obey so they could avoid a media scandal that might ruin the center's insurance contract. Instead of protecting his employee or asking the police to show an official search warrant from the county court under proper legal procedure, he leaned close to Monique's ear and lowered his voice, heavy with corporate threat. He reminded her of Mrs. Victoria's position on the board, how her record would be completely ruined if she caused trouble, and that if she wanted to keep this job to raise her young son, the only way was to voluntarily open the canvas bag and prove her innocence right there. Monique stood still, each word from the manager cutting deep into the dignity she had carefully protected for years while working there. She felt the cold heat from the radios of the two officers standing close behind her. Their devices crackling with static, they said nothing, but their fingers resting near their belts were the clearest warning about the social class distance in Buckhead. Monique's hands, rough from operating three-dimensional barcode scanners and lifting heavy diamond shipments, tightened around the frayed strap of her canvas bag. Inside that bag were no luxury jewels, no designer wallets, only a plastic container with her unfinished lunch, Jordan's old cello bow with a broken peg, and the single $5 bill she had just withdrawn from the ATM to buy a few slices of sandwich bread for dinner for mother and son. "I will say this one more time, Miss." Sterling, the manager said through clenched teeth, his eyes glancing toward Victoria's reaction as if he were trying to earn credit. "Please cooperate voluntarily before these officers have to use administrative force. We do not want to make this ugly in front of the VIP clients." Monique looked straight into the manager's eyes, then shifted her gaze to Victoria's calculating, victorious face. She did not cry. The toughness of a single mother from low-income Southwest Atlanta had taught her that tears had no value in front of heartless power systems. She repeated her request to pull footage from the warehouse's smart security cameras, where every employee movement was recorded with millimeter-level accuracy. But the only answer she received was a cold shake of the manager's head. He said the internal security review process would take at least 48 hours, and Mrs. Victoria had no obligation to wait. Exactly 48 hours earlier, Monique's life had still been moving inside a quiet, difficult space filled with hopeful melodies in her low-income apartment in Southwest Atlanta. The alarm from her cheap digital clock rang steadily at 5 in the morning, breaking the heavy fog of a Georgia winter day. Monique sat up from the old spring mattress, and the first thing she did was step quietly into the small living room where the old steam iron was already waiting. She carefully pressed every wrinkle out of the gray Apex luxury uniform shirt, making sure that even if she took the bus to work and lived in a working-class apartment complex, her appearance at the Gem Distribution Center would still be perfectly professional, giving no one a reason to throw prejudice at her. After preparing her clothes, Monique went into the narrow kitchen, where the refrigerator held only half a carton of almond milk and a few eggs. She took a big sip of water to quiet her morning hunger and decided, as usual, to skip breakfast, a habit she had built over the past 2 years to save every little bit. All the money she saved from 14-hour overtime shifts was not for herself. She set it aside for premium cello bow Rosen and the best cello strings for Jordan. Her 11-year-old son had hands capable of creating magical sounds, a true music prodigy in the middle of a poor neighborhood where violence and police sirens echoed every night. At exactly 6:15 in the morning, Monique stood on the porch and led Jordan to the school bus stop for Atlanta Arts Academy, a prestigious private school set apart in wealthy Buckhead. Jordan wore a navy blue blazer uniform and oversized khaki pants, an old outfit Monique had spent 2 weekend days searching for at a suburban Goodwill so her son would not look like an outsider among upper-class children. The boy held tightly to his old synthetic cello case, its corners reinforced by Monique with strips of black electrical tape to keep the wooden instrument from getting damp. "Mom, can I switch to clarinet?" Jordan looked up at his mother with large, sad eyes as the yellow bus slowly pulled in. "This cello is so heavy, and the kids in the advanced class said people from West End like us don't fit with old classical instruments like this." Monique bent down and held her son's small face in both hands, her eyes filled with strong determination. She told him to look straight into her eyes and remember that his music did not belong to Buckhead or West End. It belonged to his talent and his clean soul. She tightened Jordan's tie, gently patted his shoulder, and promised she would do everything she could to make sure he never had to give up his passion just because of class insults from children who had never earned a cent in their lives. When the bus rolled away, Monique stood watching until the yellow paint disappeared around the corner. Her hands tightened inside her coat pockets because she knew she had to face new financial pressure that very afternoon. During lunch break the day before, Monique had taken a bus against traffic to the administrative office of Atlanta Arts Academy. Her lonely footsteps echoed along the polished oak hallway, where portraits of major old money city donors hung on the walls. Sitting across from her at a luxurious desk was the headmaster, a man with elegant manners who always kept a cold distance from parents receiving low-income assistance. The headmaster flipped through Jordan's scholarship file, then pushed a financial notice with a red stamp from the school board toward Monique. He informed her briefly and practically that even though Jordan had earned a perfect score on the talent exam and received a partial scholarship, under the board's new policy, all students under this category had to complete a facility matching fee and instrument insurance fee of $950 before the 15th of the current month. If the money was not paid by certified check or a clean parent account, Jordan's scholarship would be automatically revoked by the system, and his seat would be given to another student on the waiting list. "Mrs. Sterling, I understand this is not a small cost for your situation," the headmaster said in an even voice, without mockery, but with the weight of an unmovable corporate rule. "But the Arts Academy is not a public charity. We have high operating standards to maintain, and if parents cannot meet the minimum financial duty, the system must filter them out." Monique looked at the bold $950 number on the paper and swallowed a bitter lump. That was the only reason she had not hesitated to sign up for 14-hour night overtime shifts at the Apex luxury warehouse for the past 2 weeks. She had accepted the manager's hidden insults and the heaviest inventory tasks other employees refused, only to make sure that by the 5th she would receive enough attendance and overtime bonus money to write the check for the school. Her son's dream rested on her thin shoulders, and she could not allow herself to collapse before that deadline arrived. Back in the grand lobby of Apex Luxury's gem distribution center in the present moment, the circle of class and racial prejudice seemed to close completely around the single mother. The tension in the lobby reached its peak when the second officer, after receiving a nod from the manager, took one long step forward. He ordered Monique to take her hand off the canvas bag and declared that if she continued delaying the verification process for the VIP client's missing property, they would be forced to escort her to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office for official procedures under the law. Monique looked at the 30 upper-class guests standing around her. Some looked down at their phones as if they did not want to witness an unpleasant scene. Others looked at her with quiet satisfaction, a confirmation of their old belief that people from Southwest Atlanta were always the source of financial trouble. No one stepped forward to say a word for her. No one mentioned how carefully she had worked for 4 years to protect every piece of their jewelry. Her dignity was cut open in a glittering space where crystal lights reflected the cruel contrast between rich and poor in America. "I wonder why we are wasting so much time on someone this obvious," Victoria Sterling Vane said, pulling out a silk handkerchief and lightly wiping her ring-covered fingers, her voice filled with peak contempt. "Open that trash bag, officer." I do not have all night to argue with people like this, knowing that if she were taken to the police station that night, Jordan would be left home alone, and his scholarship would disappear forever on the 5th, because her file would be tied to a criminal investigation. Monique slowly loosened her trembling fingers. She placed the old frayed canvas bag on the white marble reception desk, her shoulders straight, her eyes fixed on Victoria's face with the last pride of a woman who had nothing to hide. The officer stepped up and shoved his rubber-gloved hands roughly into Monique's canvas bag. He moved past the cheap plastic lunch container, pushed Jordan's old cello bow aside, and reached deep into the hidden bottom corner. When the officer's hand came out, shocked whispers suddenly spread across the lobby among the 30 VIP guests. Resting in the officer's rubber-gloved palm was a long blue Tiffany velvet box, the signature box of one of the world's most elite jewelry brands. The officer opened the lid in front of everyone. Inside the pure white velvet lining, it was completely empty. The $13,000 diamond necklace was not there. Victoria Sterling Vane's eyes changed at once, from fake anger to a cruel, victorious smile full of satisfaction, like someone who had just completed a deadly move. She pointed her diamond-ringed finger straight at Monique's face, her voice hissing through her teeth with poison. "I told you all." The empty box was in her bag, which means she secretly moved my $13,000 diamond necklace outside to an accomplice before the inventory check began. "Handcuff this thief and call the sheriff's office right now." The two officers immediately pulled stainless steel handcuffs from behind their backs, the metal chain clinking sharply in the lobby. Monique stood frozen, staring at the empty blue Tiffany box on the table, her mind completely blank as she realized a perfect corporate legal trap had been designed to destroy her. Every way out for her and her son seemed to slam shut in the cold Atlanta winter night, as truth was bent by the power of people with money. The one-sided HR process at the luxury jewelry company was always designed to happen behind closed doors, where leather chairs and the smell of new carpet tried to cover the coldness of life-changing decisions. Right after the chaos in the Apex luxury lobby temporarily settled, Monique Sterling was taken straight to the HR director's office on the 4th floor. The fluorescent lights above the office dividers buzzed loudly after everyone stopped talking, leaving a suffocating space filled only with the dry sound of papers being turned. The termination agreement and voluntary resignation letter had already been printed and placed on the glass desk like a sentence prepared in advance. The HR director, a woman who was always proud of her perfect procedures, did not look Monique in the eye. She only pushed the file and a black pen toward her. Under direct pressure from Victoria Sterling Vane, who had major influence over the logistic contracts of the Buckhead branch, HR had issued an immediate unpaid suspension against Monique Sterling. They carefully included a corporate ultimatum. If Monique agreed to sign the voluntary resignation letter, the company would close the matter internally and would not file a state-level criminal complaint for high-value property theft with the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. "Miss Sterling, please be realistic," the HR director said, lowering her voice but filling it with clear pressure. "Once the police officially open a criminal case based on the empty box found in your bag, this will go beyond our control. Signing here is the best way to protect your record." Monique looked at the fountain pen on the desk, both palms pressing together so hard that her knuckles turned pale gray. As a black single mother living in southwest Atlanta, she understood the cruel legal reality of America better than anyone. If she gave in to this pressure and signed a resignation with a vague reason tied to discipline, she would be stamping her own fate. An HR file ending under suspicion of luxury jewelry theft meant she would be permanently removed from the warehouse management industry in Georgia. But the thing more frightening than that, the thing directly threatening her family's life, was the involvement of social welfare agencies. Monique understood that once a single mother was fired for a criminal reason and became unemployed without stable income, Child Protective Services would immediately step in under strict state law. They would open a full investigation into Jordan's living environment in their low-income apartment, and her custody rights over her 11-year-old son would instantly be placed in danger under the reason that the guardian could not provide financial stability and had moral risk behavior. Social prejudice would turn her into an unfit mother, and the system would take Jordan from her arms before she had the chance to prove she had been framed. She slowly pushed the pen back to where it had been, lifted her head, looked straight at the HR director, and refused to sign the false document. Monique Sterling's footsteps dragged her exhaustion along the narrow hallway of the MARTA station as she returned to southwest Atlanta. When she pushed open the door of her old apartment, the inside was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the familiar humming of the old refrigerator in the kitchen corner. Jordan was sitting alone in the dark living room, the weak light from the street lamp outside passing through the dusty window and falling across the wall with peeling paint. The 11-year-old boy sat with his head down, knees pulled close to his chest. On Jordan's lap was the old synthetic Kello case, its corners cracked after years of riding buses with his mother. The child, who had learned to understand too early, did not cry. He did not demand some fancy new thing like his classmates at the Buckhead Academy. He was using his thin fingers to carefully pull thick strips of black electrical tape, trying to reinforce the metal latch that had broken off the previous afternoon. Jordan worked with extreme care, trying not to make any loud sound because he was afraid of adding more weight to the thin shoulders of his mother, who had just returned from a stormy work shift. Monique stood frozen in the doorway, the frayed canvas bag slipping from her hand and falling onto the narrow floor. She tried to swallow her tears back into her chest, then took light steps toward her son and placed a hand on his small shoulder. At that moment, Monique's old phone vibrated for a long moment. She quickly answered, trying to lower her voice as much as possible while stepping into the small kitchen, even though she knew Jordan had probably heard everything already. It was the call she had been waiting 2 hours for from the county legal aid office. But the answer from the operator on the other end was like cold water killing the last small flame of hope. They informed her in a formal tone that because of budget cuts and a massive case backlog, the waiting list for a public interest lawyer to take her labor dispute and defamation case now stretched 3 months out. They could not intervene in a case involving theft allegations of high-value jewelry from a VIP customer until there was an official court document. Jordan quietly stood from the corner of the living room. He placed the old cello against the wooden wall near the plastic box containing his own handwritten sheet music. The boy walked to his mother, his hands stained with black adhesive from the electrical tape as he gently held the edge of Monique's uniform shirt. He looked up at her with clear but sad eyes, and the gentle voice of a music prodigy suddenly became rough with a decision far too heavy for an 11-year-old. "Mom, I hate the cello now," Jordan whispered, his eyes lowered to the floor to avoid looking at the tears rolling down his mother's cheeks. "I don't want to go to that school in Buckhead anymore. The kids there always look at my old shoes and say people like us shouldn't touch these instruments. I want to stay home with you. I don't need that scholarship anymore." The words of her 11-year-old son stabbed through the last wall of Monique's emotions like a sharp needle. She knew her son did not hate the cello. He loved music more than life itself, but the natural sensitivity had made him realize that his passion was becoming a financial sentence choking his mother's life. Monique knelt on the floor and held Jordan tightly in her arms. She let her sobs break open inside the cramped kitchen, where even spoons touching old cereal bowls felt careful. She did not cry because of the injustice the corporate system had poured over her. She cried from the helplessness of a mother who realized her gifted son was learning to break his own dream in order to protect his mother's safety. The next morning, Monique Sterling did not allow herself to collapse in the Southwest Atlanta apartment. The instinct of an excellent supply chain manager pushed her to make one last effort to save her honor before the 15th came closer. She took the earliest bus back to the Apex Luxury Gem Distribution Center. Her goal was to meet the technical department and request raw data from the three-dimensional barcode scanner system from that work shift. This 3D scanner system was advanced logistics management technology. It did not only scan barcodes, it also automatically recorded the weight and volume of all employees' belongings and bags when they entered and exited the secured area, accurate to 0.01 grams. Monique understood that if the system showed the weight of her canvas bag when she entered the shift and when she left as exactly the same, that would mean the empty Tiffany velvet box had already been placed in her bag by someone else, or that she had never carried the necklace out of the storage area. This was the only hard digital evidence that could break Victoria Sterling Vane's accusation in front of police detectives. But when Monique entered the warehouse management office in the basement, the busy space filled with real-time monitoring screens greeted her with complete distance. The warehouse manager, a coworker who had many times asked her to fix invoice system errors over the weekend, looked at her nervously and would not allow her to cross the security line. "I'm very sorry, Monique," the warehouse manager said, his fingers constantly tapping the edge of the keyboard as a stress reaction. "I received an order from branch management. The 3D barcode scanner at Gate 2 had an unexpected technical incident related to cache memory during the exact Friday afternoon inventory window. All raw data from that shift was automatically overwritten during scheduled maintenance on Saturday morning. There are no files left on the local server." "An unexpected incident," Monique said, her voice hardening, each word carrying deep anger as she realized the sophistication of the Power Alliance. Apex's supply chain security system always has 3 independent backup storage layers. How can scheduled maintenance erase the raw data from one specific time window unless someone manually intervened from a high-level admin account? The warehouse manager did not answer. He turned away and stared at the screen showing other logistics containers, a cowardly silence showing he would rather sacrifice the truth to keep his chair than stand against the orders of those at the top of the board. The betrayal of the security system, technology created to protect transparency, had now been corrupted into a tool to hide guilt for the upper class, leaving Monique alone inside a web of lies covered by clean corporate technical terms. Monique Sterling walked out of the distribution center, the rainwater on her shoes dried into thin gray streaks. She stood beside the bus stop on the main road, feeling the absolute loneliness of one small working-class person facing the money power of Buckhead old money. They did not only control economic contracts, they controlled the HR system, security data, and even the silence of the coworkers around her. While Monique faced the possible total collapse of her family life in West End, Victoria Sterling Vane sat inside her luxury leather-walled study in Buckhead. The upper-class woman did not feel even a trace of guilt for her cruel framing. To her, the career and honor of a black warehouse employee like Monique meant nothing compared to the perfect image of her youngest daughter and the $13,000 insurance payout their family was about to receive from Lloyd's of London. Victoria smiled coldly, her finger moving over the screen of her expensive iPad as she drafted an official document. As one of the major donors and influential board members of Atlanta Arts Academy, Victoria decided to make one final move to rip out every possible resistance from the single mother. She sent an urgent complaint, sealed by her family law office, directly to the school board and scholarship review committee. In the complaint, Victoria Sterling Vane used perfectly passive-aggressive language to demand that the school immediately remove Jordan Sterling from the advanced student list for the new semester. The reason she gave was that the child's mother, Ms. Monique Sterling, was now the main suspect in an organized criminal investigation involving the theft of high-value property at Apex Luxury. She stressed that the presence of a theft suspect's son would seriously affect the school's elite moral standards, its reputation, and create an unsafe environment for the children of other white donors in Buckhead. The door of Monique Sterling's apartment seemed to shake again under the waves of injustice coming down from America's upper class. The email notification on her phone gave a dry ding late that afternoon, announcing that an emergency meeting of the Atlanta Arts Academy board had been set for 9 o'clock the next morning to review Jordan's enrollment status. Every exit for the single mother and her gifted son seemed to have completely closed before the cold alliance of the upper class, leaving a painful emotional question hanging in the air. Who would stand up to protect their dignity before everything was crushed forever by this system of lies? The rusty wind chime hanging at the entrance of the Waffle House near Interstate 85 gave a dry sound when Monique Sterling pushed the door open. Inside, the air was filled with the smell of burnt frying grease and the low rumble of an old heater trying to fight the heavy cold of the Atlanta evening. Monique chose the most hidden corner booth where pale yellow neon light flickered over the scratched fake wood Formica tabletop. She placed her worn, fake leather wallet on the table, slowly smoothed the folds of the unpaid suspension notice from Apex Luxury, and took out her cracked screen phone to check the available balance on her Capital One credit app. The numbers sat alone on the dark screen, reminding the single mother that she had exactly $42 available before the next week's basic bills came crashing in. Emotional exhaustion surrounded Monique like thick fog. She did not cry because years of raising Jordan alone in southwest Atlanta had trained her to survive hardship with cold-blooded focus. Instead of letting fear freeze her mind, Monique used the tip of a clicking pen on the back of an old receipt, trying to calculate backup financial options. The cybersecurity system at the gem distribution center deleting the raw data of the 3D barcode scanner during the exact Friday afternoon window was not simply a technical error. It was a calculated erasure, a one-way corporate process activated to choke off every chance for her to clear her name before police detectives officially completed the criminal file for the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. As Monique prepared to gather her papers and catch the late bus home, a large figure quietly appeared and pulled out the chair across from her. Monique startled and reached to pull back her documents, but when she recognized the man's face under the dim light, she slowly lowered her hand. It was Bradley Moore, the veteran security director of Apex Luxury, a white man with graying hair and a face deeply lined like a former Atlanta homicide detective. Bradley was not wearing the center security uniform. He wore a simple dark gray windbreaker, his eyes scanning the diner carefully before he pushed an iPad toward Monique. "I should not be here, Monique," Bradley Moore said, his rough smoker's voice lowered to the minimum, mixing with the sound of spoons touching plates from truck drivers at the next row of booths. "After you left the building this afternoon, branch management issued an internal notice locking all my access to the Tier 2 data storage server, but they underestimated an old detective. I always make a habit of backing up raw footage from the independent surveillance system to a personal cloud drive before system maintenance procedures run." Bradley Moore tapped the iPad screen and opened a high-resolution raw video extracted from a hidden backup surveillance camera, a camera tucked behind the bulletproof glass wall of the packing area that Victoria Sterling Vane had never known about. The footage clearly showed each detailed timestamp. Monique was turned away from the reception table, signing the end-of-day gem shipment log. In the right corner of the screen, Victoria Sterling Vane skillfully used her body to block the view of lower-level staff, her diamond-ringed fingers opening Monique's old frayed canvas bag on the waiting chair, just enough to quickly drop the empty blue Tiffany velvet box into the bottom corner, then calmly walking toward the lobby to trigger the theft accusation. "This footage answers everything, Bradley," Monique whispered, her fingers shaking as she looked at the hard evidence that could clear her name. "Why don't you send this to the sheriff's office immediately?" Bradley Moore shook his head slightly, gave a small sigh, and leaned forward, his eyes showing the practical helplessness of someone who understood how Buckhead power alliances worked. "That is the problem, Monique," Bradley said, his voice turning painfully firm. The local police system in this area depends heavily on nonprofit budget donations from the Sterling Vane Family Trust. If I submit this iPad through the normal process, this file will be held in the evidence room under the reason of verifying digital integrity for 6 months. They will drag it out until you are financially exhausted and lose custody of your son. But I know one person who has enough top corporate authority to break this silence without waiting for county administration. 15 minutes later, Bradley Moore drove his old pickup truck away from the suburban diner with Monique, heading straight toward Midtown Atlanta, where glass and steel skyscrapers glowed with cold blue light in the night. The truck stopped in front of a private office tower with no large sign, only biometric control gates and private security guards stationed at the entrance to the private lobby. Bradley led Monique through a secured hallway hidden behind the service elevators and into a large financial advisory office with a full view of the downtown lights. Standing beside the floor-to-ceiling glass window was a tall, middle-aged black man wearing a dark blue protective jacket like a warehouse technical worker. When he turned and removed his work safety glasses, Monique took a small step back, her eyes widening in shock. It was the same middle-aged man she had spent 3 full hours patiently teaching 2 days earlier during a late shift, showing him how to calibrate the automatic weight system and 3D barcode scanning algorithm when he had appeared at the warehouse under the title of Trainee Technical Inspector from headquarters. But now the man walked toward the solid walnut desk where an encrypted blockchain security phone and top-secret corporate financial files had already been placed. That man was Marcus Vance, the anonymous black billionaire, the founder and true owner of Apex Luxury's entire system, and the diamond-level donor behind Atlanta's largest arts scholarship fund. "Good evening, Ms. Sterling," Marcus Vance said, his deep, warm, coldly powerful corporate voice breaking the silence of the room. "I apologize for hiding my identity while working with you in the inventory area 2 days ago. But it was the only way I could directly evaluate the integrity of my gym supply chain management system without it being distorted by the false performance reports of branch directors in Charlotte or Buckhead." Marcus Vance stepped closer and picked up the note containing the ultra-small weight inventory algorithms Monique had handwritten the previous week to submit to HR as a warning about a system weakness. "For the past 4 years, Ms. Sterling, you have been the only warehouse manager who detected the 8.02-gram weight difference in my automated scanning system. A small error branch leadership kept trying to ignore so they could justify shrinkage," Marcus Vance said, his eyes fixed on Monique with the deep understanding of an experienced executive. "I have been watching your case from the moment our central cybersecurity system alerted me about the Friday afternoon data overwrite incident. Buckhead Old Money thinks they can use money and local political influence to turn my companies into their personal playground and turn my honest employees into scapegoats for their children's mistakes. They are wrong." The narrator paused in a low voice. "If you were in Monique's position, realizing that the man you had once trained at work was the billionaire who held the fate of both your company and your son's school, would you ask him to use money to shut down the scandal immediately, or accept stepping into a public legal confrontation to reclaim your honor completely? Leave your view in the comments below." The silence of the high-level Midtown Atlanta office seemed to hold the entire storm about to fall on the guilty. Marcus Vance walked to the desk and picked up the encrypted security phone. His finger moved quickly across the screen, connecting directly to the private line of the chairman of the Atlanta Arts Academy board, the man preparing to lead the emergency meeting to expel Jordan the next morning. "Mr. Chairman, this is Marcus Vance," the billionaire said into the phone, his voice carrying no loud anger, but every word holding enough financial weight to freeze all of the school's expansion projects in a single note. "I have just received information about student Steed's complaint against Jordan Sterling, filed by Mrs. Victoria Sterling Vane. From this moment on, Vance Group requests that you call an emergency board meeting at exactly 9 o'clock tomorrow morning in the Academy's main executive room. Send a mandatory summons to the law office of the Sterling Vane family. Require Mrs. Victoria to appear in person and explain the strategic sponsorship of our group before I decide whether to withdraw the entire credit line for this year's school development fund." Marcus Vance ended the call with a dry click, then turned to Monique and Bradley Moore, his shoulders straight under the ceiling lights of the high-rise. That short call had opened a new dramatic loop, a powerful emotional cliffhanger promising a classic confrontation inside the Temple of Art the next morning, where Victoria Sterling Vane's false upper-class mask would have to face the highest force of hard truth and unshakable corporate power. At exactly 9 in the morning, the electronic lock of the main executive room at Atlanta Arts Academy gave a neat, cold click, breaking the natural silence of the elegant Buckhead hallway. Victoria Sterling Vane entered with the proud air of an old upper-class woman, her sharp heels striking clear sounds against the oak floor. She wore a cream cashmere coat and held tightly to the file demanding Jordan Sterling's scholarship removal and urgent expulsion. Confidence showed clearly on Victoria's carefully made-up face. She believed this emergency meeting had been created so the school leadership could quickly carry out the order of a major donor like her family and remove the son of a theft suspect from this elite temple of art. However, when she walked deeper into the executive conference room, Victoria's steps suddenly stopped. Her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw a seating arrangement completely outside every plan she had calculated. Sitting in the leather chair in the hidden corner of the conference table was not one of the academic directors who always bowed to donors, but Monique Sterling. The black single mother sat silently, her back straight against the chair, wearing a neat plain cloth outfit, her hands folded tightly on her knees with a frighteningly calm manner. Sitting right beside her was Marcus Vance, the powerful self-made billionaire behind Atlanta's Gem Logistics Group. He wore a navy Savile Row suit tailored perfectly by hand down to every stitch, his arms folded across his chest, his gaze quiet but filled with the crushing authority of a man who held the financial fate of the entire Arts Academy. Victoria Sterling Vane immediately felt social unease spread through the secured glass room, but the arrogant instinct of an old money woman would not allow her to show confusion in front of people of color. She leaned against the walnut table, refused to look at Monique, aimed her sharp eyes and passive-aggressive, manipulative tone straight at the black billionaire sitting still. Mr. Vance, I truly do not understand why an emergency board meeting of the Academy includes the presence of unrelated people like this, Victoria said, her voice sharp, intentionally stretching certain words to stress clear class division. You are allowing a thief, a high-value property theft suspect, who was just suspended from Apex Luxury to pollute our executive conference room. This is not only a serious violation of the school's security rules, but also a grave insult to the honor of the white donors who have poured millions into this place to keep their children learning in an environment with the purest moral standards. Marcus Vance's expression did not change at the words full of racial and class prejudice from the woman across from him. He did not move his shoulders or interrupt. He only slowly pressed one finger against the touch control button built into the walnut table. The central projector screen immediately lowered. The tube lights above dimmed by half, leaving the room focused entirely on the cold blue light from lines of real-time digital data. Instead of showing Bradley Moore's raw backup surveillance video, which Victoria feared, the large screen displayed a complex digital audit board with a bold title about confidential blockchain transaction reports linked directly to a network of high-end pawn shops near Miami Beach, Florida. Mrs. Sterling Vane, I think you should direct your attention to this screen before making any judgments about the moral standards of Jordan or Monique, Marcus Vance said, his low voice steady, carrying the coldness of a global supply chain executive. I did not call this meeting to listen to a speech about race. I called it as the ultimate owner of Vance Group, the exclusive sponsor holding 40% of Atlanta Arts Academy's operating budget. A man in a dark gray suit stepped out from behind Marcus. He was the group's chief legal officer. He opened a file sealed with a digital security mark and began reading the report in a precise administrative voice, breaking each layer of Victoria's false defense. At 4 o'clock last Friday afternoon, while Ms. Monique Sterling was completing the end-of-day warehouse inventory process for the Buckhead Country Club charity event, a property consignment transaction was successfully completed at a high-end gem pawn shop in Miami, the legal experts said, pointing to the unique GIA gem identification code GIA 8832 on the projector screen. The Tiffany diamond necklace worth $13,000 with this serial number, which was registered as your personal property, was personally brought in for consignment by your youngest daughter, Miss Chloe Vane, in exchange for an emergency cash payment of $9,000 to cover black market credit debts owed to an online betting group in Florida. Chloe's full identification, digital fingerprint, and biometric camera image at the pawn shop were recorded by their encrypted blockchain system and cannot be changed. The executive conference rooms suddenly fell into silence so deep that the loud hum of the central air system could be heard. Victoria Sterling Vane's face shifted from arrogance to a dead ash gray under the light from the projector screen. Her diamond-covered hands gripped the edge of the glass table, her knuckles turning white as the legal expert delivered the final deadly blow. Mrs. Sterling Vane, at exactly 8:30 a.m. This Monday, your law office filed a $13,000 property loss claim with Lloyd's of London on your behalf, claiming the item had been stolen by a warehouse employee at the Atlanta branch, the legal expert said sharply, his eyes fixed on the trembling villain. Knowingly filing a false claim for an asset that had already been disposed of for financial gain, combined with organized framing and defamation against another citizen, fully meets the criminal elements of federal insurance fraud under the United States Criminal Code. This is a lie, Victoria stammered, her voice losing control, the elegant upper-class mask completely shattering and revealing the panic of someone who understood the brutal legal consequences of federal court. You have no right to access my family's personal financial records. My husband is a member of the county executive committee. Do you know who you are dealing with? Marcus Vance stood from his executive chair. He placed both palms on the walnut table, leaned forward, and looked straight into Victoria's eyes with the deeply restrained anger of a man who had witnessed too much injustice toward poor workers. Vance Group owns exactly 40% of your family trust's equity position at SunTrust Bank, Mrs. Sterling Vane, Marcus Vance said, his deep voice sounding like corporate thunder in the closed room. From this moment on, we are officially withdrawing the entire credit line and activating the contract termination clause due to serious violation of your duty of loyalty as a business partner. Your family will have to settle all maturing debts within the next 48 hours. And most importantly, the full digital file covering your insurance fraud, deletion of security camera data, and organized defamation has already been sent by my legal team directly to the FBI office in Atlanta 15 minutes ago. The oak door of the executive conference room suddenly opened wide. Standing at the doorway were two middle-aged men in dark gray suits, bronze badges of federal agents from the FBI's Georgia field office pinned to their jackets, entered with the cold, practical steps of people carrying out the highest orders of the law. One agent stepped forward in front of Victoria with an emergency arrest warrant signed by a federal district judge. Mrs. Victoria Sterling Vane, you are under arrest on charges of federal insurance fraud and conspiracy to destroy evidence, the federal agent said in a formal, cold, firm voice. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say from this moment on may be used against you in federal court. The sharp click of stainless steel handcuffs sounded clearly in the room, locking around the wrists of the woman who had been so proud of her Buckhead bloodline. The two federal agents turned and escorted Victoria toward the main door. American law enforcement moved cleanly, coldly, and mercilessly when forensic audit evidence crossed beyond local political connections. The conference room door opened wide toward the main hallway of Atlanta Arts Academy. It was 9:30 in the morning, the time when ultra-rich Atlanta parents were gathered in the main lobby to prepare for the new semester orientation for their children. Dozens of students and parents, the same people who the day before had whispered and mocked Jordan's old Goodwill uniform, the same people who had signed the petition demanding the expulsion of the black child prodigy, now all stepped aside against the hallway walls. They stared in shock and disbelief as they watched one of the most powerful women on the board, Victoria Sterling Vane, being escorted between two federal agents with her hands locked behind her back. Her expensive cashmere coat now looked messy, her face lowered in humiliation to avoid the staring eyes of people from her own class. The collapse of a false upper-class mask happened in public, completely destroying the Sterling Vane family's reputation in the very place where they had used social privilege to crush the dignity of the poor. Monique Sterling slowly walked out of the conference room behind Marcus Vance, her shoulders straight under the morning Atlanta sunlight shining through the large glass walls. She watched Victoria slowly being led into the security elevator, and a deep emotional release rose to her chest after days of silent humiliation. Justice did not come from begging or quick forgiveness. It won through the power of clean data that could not be overwritten, closing a dark chapter of corporate systemic injustice and opening a new boundary of respect for honest workers. When the shocked whispers of parents and students in the hallway of Atlanta Arts Academy faded behind the newly closed soundproof glass door, the air inside the high-level executive conference room softened and gave way to a deep silence of healing. The projector screen went dark, and the complex digital charts and blockchain traces disappeared, returning the room to the gentle morning sunlight of Buckhead. Marcus Vance slowly turned around. He adjusted the cuff of his Savile Row suit, and the cold power of a logistics billionaire immediately softened as he looked toward Monique Sterling sitting at the end of the table. He picked up a black velvet-covered leather portfolio from the center of the walnut table and walked slowly toward the single mother. Miss Sterling, your honor and professional ability are not things for people with social privilege to price or stain, Marcus Vance said, his voice warm and deep but filled with firm resolve, the manner of an experienced executive who respected the law. Vance Group owes you an official apology for the corruption of the cybersecurity system at the Apex Luxury Branch. But in the real world of business, I understand that an official statement cannot make up for the emotional pain and financial pressure you and your son have carried over the past 48 hours. Marcus slowly pushed the dark green folder toward Monique, revealing a top-level personnel decision bearing the raised seal of headquarters. Starting at 8 o'clock the next morning, Monique Sterling would officially be appointed Global Supply Chain Operations Director for the entire Apex Luxury Gem distribution system. This senior position came not only with income worthy of her truly outstanding analytical ability, 3 times higher than her old warehouse manager salary, but more importantly, all of her data reporting would connect directly to the independent control board at headquarters, completely outside the reach of local branch directors. The company also signed documents to cover all legal fees and penalties caused by the temporary freezing of her bank account during the investigation. At the same time, the chairman of the Atlanta Arts Academy board stepped forward, his face still slightly awkward after the classic legal takedown that had just happened. He placed an official apology letter on the table, signed by the entire school administration, publicly admitting the school's rushed and mistaken review of Jordan's student status under one-sided pressure from the Sterling Vane family. Instead of the risky partial scholarship from before, the school had decided to convert Jordan's place into the Vance Premium Full Scholarship. This scholarship would cover 100% of his tuition, premium instrument insurance, the cost of Rosen, the best cello strings, and the full budget for his international performance tours throughout the next 7 years of study, with no matching financial requirement from his family. Monique raised a hand and wiped her tear-soaked lashes. She did not say thank you with empty words. She only nodded softly and held the file tightly to her chest as if she were holding a strong shield for her young son's future. That afternoon, Monique Sterling returned home not on the crowded MARTA bus, heavy with smoke and heat, on Route 54. A black Lincoln Navigator provided by the company with a neatly dressed driver rolled through the slopes of downtown and headed straight toward low-income Southwest Atlanta. Sitting in the soft leather back seat, Monique looked out the window at the warm orange sunset spreading over old duplex roofs and cheap grocery stores in the working-class neighborhood. The car stopped in front of her porch. The quiet engine shut off, closing the long days when the single mother had hidden her fear and struggled to survive. Monique pushed open the wooden door of the apartment. The floor still groaned under her feet in the familiar way, but the smell of sweet corn chicken soup from the kitchen felt much lighter today. Jordan was sitting alone on the knotted rug in the middle of the living room. When he saw his mother enter carrying a brand new cello case made of glossy black metal-coated carbon fiber, the 11-year-old's eyes widened slightly and his thin hands dropped the black electrical tape strips he had been holding onto the floor. She walked over and placed the beautiful instrument case on the fake wood plastic table beside the wrinkled $5 bill Jordan had saved and given her the night before. Monique did not say a word. She only knelt on the floor and held her son's thin shoulders tightly, letting tears roll freely down the fabric of his uniform. Jordan gently ran his small fingers through his mother's hair, then stood and opened the carbon fiber latch of the new case. He held the cello with its beautiful polished oak body. The child prodigy no longer needed the plastic communication board of mutism. He placed the bow on the strings and played a wordless Bach piece. The warm, deep cello sound echoed through the window of the old apartment and floated out into the air, where working neighbors stood quietly on their porches listening with deep pride. Mother and son cried together in the sunset, but this time it was not the choking cry of despair. It was tears of complete peace, of dignity fully restored before the eyes of society. The story of Monique and little Jordan is not simply a battle between good and evil in the corporate world. It is a mirror reflecting the harsh reality of class structure and invisible prejudice surrounding low-income workers of color in America every day. In a major city like Atlanta, where the luxury of Buckhead and the struggle of Southwest sit only a few miles apart, poverty is not only a lack of money. It is an invisible label that makes you the first suspect whenever an upper-class system fails. When you live cleanly, work 14 hours a day, and skip lunch to save every dollar for your child's dream, the cold social system outside can still be ready to take everything from you with a single false accusation from people holding the privilege of money. We often praise America as a land of equal opportunity, where the talent of a child like Jordan should naturally open the door to the future. But the cruel truth is that without the strong protection of an honest mother like Monique, that child's artistic gift could easily be crushed by the greed and arrogance of people with social privilege. People like Victoria Sterling Vane did not only want to take Monique's job, they wanted to take Jordan's future. They wanted that child to believe he did not deserve to stand in the same temple of art as their children. They used social prejudice to justify their own wrongdoing, turning the poor into perfect scapegoats for their personal insurance schemes. But there is one law that old money always forgets in its calculations of control. The dignity of a mother who lives a clean life can never be priced or buried by fake evidence. When you work with all your professional ability, when you understand every algorithm and supply chain management process, your integrity turns into clean data, into digital traces that cannot be overwritten. Evil people may erase the security camera of one room. They may use political influence to force cowardly silence from those around them, but they cannot erase the trace of objective truth encoded by honesty. The blockchain transactions from the Miami pawn shop were hard proof that lies always leave a trail, and when the American corporate legal system operates properly, it has no room for mercy toward federal-level fraud. The intervention of billionaire Marcus Vance in this story gives all of us a deep lesson about the nature of modern justice. Real justice does not come from charitable gifts handed down from above or temporary pity from the upper class. It comes from system accountability and absolute respect for a person's real ability. A true business leader is not someone who uses power to hide the wrongdoing of VIP clients in order to protect a shallow public image. A true leader is willing to use all of their financial resources to protect the most honest employees, the people quietly creating core value for the business every single day. The reward given to Monique was not random rescue. It was the restoration of the rightful position of an outstanding warehouse logistics expert. The moment Jordan played the new cello under the West End sunset, without fear, without the plastic communication board of mutism, was the moment of true healing. The greatest healing does not come from pills. It comes from a person being given back fairness and the right to be publicly respected by society. When a child sees his mother standing tall, honored for her honesty and real ability, the darkness of trauma inside him naturally gives way to the light of the future. Thank you for staying with me until the final seconds of this journey. If there is one message I want you to keep in mind when this video ends, it is this. Never look at someone's worn uniform or neighborhood and use it to judge the value of their soul. You never know what harsh lines they are crossing to protect their children's dreams. And if you are a Monique in real life, working 14 hours a day, facing unfair prejudice or cold power alliances at work, keep your shoulders straight. Your integrity is your greatest weapon, the lighthouse that no false power can put out. The truth may be delayed by administrative procedures or cowardly silence, but it will always find a way to come into the light. May peace, warmth, and the feeling of safety be present in your home tonight beside the people you love after long hours of hard work. I wish you a peaceful night.